Hello, my name is Joy Wisdom, and as you can see I'm the founder of Joy Wisdom Trust. It's a new platform for women and children's health, but it's also looking at education and deep dive into why we end up feeling exhausted, why our children have ADHD and eczema and other children don't. So I would like to talk to you today around women's exhaustion and pregnancy. In my 20 years plus experience as a clinical health provider, I found that women were very exhausted before they went in at the birth point, the birth process. What happened was that in my finds, women they have done so much, they've worked, they've looked after other children, they're looking after a family, and we have the tick box list for the equipment, etc. But actually, are we prepared for the birth process? And from my experience, that is way down the line on thinking or awareness these days. And unfortunately, our women in the third trimester, which is when the infant, the baby, is drawing all of that massive growth spurt and drawing a lot of the vitamins, minerals, support for that growth, what we're eating. It's taking all the goodness in that massive growth spurt in the third trimester. From my opinion and from my perspective, we do need to support our women in the third trimester, which is why in Joy Wisdom Trust we have programs to support women in their pregnancy and to enable them to be more prepared. Because if you are exhausted before you go into the birth process, you're going to be very exhausted at the end of it. Because, as some women say, giving birth is like running a marathon, and you need that energy. You need that va-va-boom during that birth process. And having had children myself, I know all about that. If we are very much in that exhausted state, we don't have that oxytocin that comes naturally in the birth process. If we are exhausted, there is more probability that there will be intervention. There will be a level of intervention because you haven't got the energy to push anymore, because you are already exhausted, especially with the first child, which can take a longer period to deliver. A second child is much easier to deliver because you've already had one, and the body knows what is required and has opened up for that second delivery, second birth. So from my point of view, we need to support women in pregnancy to help them, especially in that third trimester, where they are then able to have much greater abilities in preparing for birth. It's more than the tick box list of equipment. You need to be, as a mother, you need to be very much prepared for that process. The more prepared you are, the more energy you have at that time, the easier the birth is. You have less chance of intervention. Now, intervention has become very popular over the last 30 years. In my day, when I was having my children, it was unheard of. They were all natural births. and a C-section was very rare in the 70s. Today, we are looking at 40, 50, over 50% of births are C-section or elected C-section and emergency C-section that takes place. We have enormous consequences to mother and to infant when there is intervention. And having worked and trained in craniosacral therapy some 20 odd years ago, and working with babies, working with mothers in pregnancy, etc., one of the things that I found with doing that, working with one-to-one with babies, was that they had birth trauma because of the long birth, the short birth, the intervention. And from a craniosacral point of view, Von 2 or forceps will affect the cranium. It will affect the elements of different aspects of the child, so that where they can have earache, they can have a lot of issues around teething. And this can be because of the cranium that has torsions, not aligned, which is another reason why in Joy Wisdom Trust I have designed programs that women and babies can have skeletal realignment. It's not just the cranium. You need the whole of the body and skeletal to be aligned here. Women need their pelvis putting back into alignment because during pregnancy our posture changes, the weight, the extra weight that we carry on the joints can be detrimental, and we can then end up having lots and lots of issues after birth because of what had happened. Having carried a 10-pound-4 baby, let me say that is quite a big strain on the physical body. So by getting that back into alignment, it means we're going to avoid having back issues, pelvic issues, and certainly it allows those muscles to go back in the abdomen and helping women to help them to get their figure back and those muscles returning to normal with specific. We have a lot to learn around pregnancy and birth, and to be honest, most women live on empty because of what we do. We are juggling home, career, children, we're looking after parents, etc., etc. So we can have a huge amount of pressures upon us, and we can live levels of burnout and fatigue. Unfortunately, that burnout and fatigue will affect the rest of the family and the family unit. When there is birth trauma involved, mother and baby and even dad can have birth trauma because of the experience and intervention that has taken place. Emotional release methods are fast, and having worked with children with this for 20 years, they are turned around in 1 or 2 sessions. And of course that takes away the worry for the parents, grandparents, because a fractious child is not happy. It's not, by any stretch of the imagination, is not happy. Everybody has sleepless nights, etc., etc. And releasing this emotion from the baby, from the mother, will help them to be able to realign and enjoy life again. If we don't deal with this birth trauma, the elements or consequences that comes from that, and they are long-term consequences, are eczema for the infant, and some children have eczema very early on, within days of being born, and there are various reasons for this, and one of them is birth trauma. The other is the anxiety of the mother while in the womb. And of course that can cause its own trauma before they're even born. It can also be from the lack of good bacteria of not going through the birth canal, bypassing that with C-section, and then not breastfeeding, which of course is where the baby gets the other elements of good bacteria to help to build the immune system. So birth and the consequences from birth and the type of birth we've had can actually be involved in postnatal depression, or postpartum depression as it's now called, depression, anxiety, and very much working with women 3-4 years later after the birth, they are still suffering with anxiety. And that anxiety, taking an antidepressant won't do you with that, because it's emotional. And emotional trauma needs methods to be able to release that from the individual. And this is what we can offer at Joy Wisdom Trust. There are programs for parents and for infants. I've met people that are suffering from birth trauma in their 20s and their 30s as a health professional. We have a team that can help people here, because we can end up with underlying post-traumatic stress as well as birth trauma, postnatal depression. And there is lots and lots of evidence that women are still suffering from postnatal depression, some 4-5 years later. So we really do need to look at this very early on to help the mother and the baby to bond, but also the family unit, because this has a huge knock-on effect within families. When the mother's not feeling well in the family unit, it affects everybody. Things tend to fall apart when mums aren't their normal selves and juggling all of these things. So it's even more important for us to look after our women, because they hold the family together, and they are the ones that are the core of the family in most cases. So we need to rethink. Intervention happens, but let's put things in place so that we don't have this knock-on effect of eczema, but also cognitive issues, ADHD. ADHD is a long-term issue from birth trauma, and in every child I have treated one-to-one with ADHD has had birth trauma. And it starts as birth trauma, and then it grows into other elements of behaviour and other elements of cognitive or lack of cognitive creation. Pathways are missed, dopamine is reduced, etc. And this causes all sorts of different issues for children, for adults. And of course it becomes an issue on a much bigger scale, because if we don't get rid of this birth trauma, it becomes genetic. It creates genetic DNA within the individual. And as we know, people can be suffering from ADHD for 60 years. It's like a prison. It's not great to live that life of anxiety, mind going at 100 miles an hour. Nobody deserves that. And especially when it comes from birth trauma or adverse trauma of other kinds. Obviously we can have it passed down, and it does pass down through generations. There's no doubt about it. But we also have methods to help with that. And we need to start thinking from a bigger frame here to help these individuals, because we now have generations of ADHD that is passed down from one generation to the other, and it just gets worse. It doesn't get better. And as we know, the medication, it doesn't cure, it suppresses. And that suppression is an awful way to live when your mind wants to work a different way. And it's fighting the suppression. I have a massive experience of mental health, stress, trauma, depression, anxiety, all sorts of different types of mental health issues. And I have specialised in it and worked with people on many, many different levels. And why I wanted to set up Joy Wisdom Trust, to educate people, educate professionals on how we really need to upgrade our thinking here, upgrade our understanding, and quite frankly, we can save economically millions and billions every month, because what we're doing isn't working from my point of view. So if you have issues around birth trauma, anxiety, depression, your child has cognitive issues, please contact Joy Wisdom Trust. If you know somebody who is pregnant and needs help to be more relaxed, prepare for their birth experience, and to prepare for going home, because believe me, a lot of parents don't, and it's such a surprise when they have a new youngster, their bundle of joy, who they love very much, but don't really understand their needs. I have spoken to a lot of people, professionals, etc., around going home from birth. And I spoke to a midwife, and she was very high up in the NHS and in charge of health visitors and so on. And I asked her, how did you feel when you came home with your first child? And she said, well, I sat there and he was in the crib, and I thought, well, what do I do with you? And I said to her, well, you as a midwife, if you don't know, how do the rest know? So unfortunately, the practicalities aren't there, and the practicalities, we have relied on other people to help us. So mothers, grandmothers, aunts, the crone of the village, all of those sort of things through the ages to help us understand. And because of the diversity of where we live nowadays, we haven't got that background. We haven't got that support that was very much relied upon in villages, in families, etc. You had somebody who passed on that knowledge. And this is what we want to do in Joy Wisdom Trust. And my team of specialists will help you. And we have education, we have programs of support, and we have programs of support for parents to understand more around the cognitive issues and the elements around what we can do to prevent and avoid if something happens, then knowing that there is this support that you can go to, because believe me, it's not a very good start to life when you have birth trauma, when you have that adverse trauma. And it is unacknowledged by professionals, and we really need them to be educated to a much higher degree and not think, oh well, they'll grow out of it, because they don't. And believe me, it causes all sorts of other issues, such as emotional pain, gut issues, breathing issues. It can go on and on and on. And let's give them a good start to life. Let's give parents a good start to being a parent and having a family with understanding, education that is practical, and skills that you can learn and put into practice very quickly. It's not rocket science, believe me. And I have put a lot of my experiences and my reality experience of working with mums, babies, etc., is that we only know what we know until we know differently. And we're not taught. And this is where Joy, Wisdom, Trust wants to put filling those gaps and educating all types of people, communities, professionals, as well as parents, or a parent-to-be. The more prepared we are, the better. We do put a lot of time and effort into choosing a car or a holiday. We need to do the same around birth. Logical to me. If you would like a free 20-minute Horizon call, we can suggest to you the best options, whether that's one-to-one or a program of education that would help you, to empower you, to support you, and give you the tools and the skills that can be at your fingertips. I am Joy Wisdom, and if you would like to contact us, it's joywisdomtrust.org. We are a not-for-profit organisation, and we are wanting to give concessions and free treatments for those who have less money in their pockets, but that comes from grants and donations. And if we have helped you in any way, we would suggest a donation, please, to help other families, other parents, other babies, other infants and toddlers, children that can also then benefit from Joy, Wisdom, Trust, knowledge and experience that can help you. Contact either by phone or email, and you can find those details on the website joywisdomtrust.org. Thank you for listening.